Hey guys, welcome to the Leadership to Wealth podcast. And we do have a very special guest for you today. And this one's really near and dear to my heart. She is a cancer survivor, but I don't think that really fully encompasses all that she is, all that she's done. And we're going to get into that, being a best-selling author, a speaker, and mom, all of these things. So guys, listen up, join me today as we get to hear some real inspiration from Christine Handy. Christine, how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you. That was a great intro. I appreciate it.
I don't know how emotional this interview is going to be because, when you talk about something like cancer, it really hits people differently in many ways. But I want to get right into this conversation about how it affects you as a woman, because I actually asked my wife I said, what questions would you like to ask? And
I love it.
Because I was the bystander as she went through her own challenges. I was the one beside her. And the first question I've got to ask you, Christine, right out the gate is, for most women, they already struggle and are challenged with self-image, with how they view their bodies. Many women have issues with the mirror, when it comes to intimacy with partners, with their spouse. They prefer the lights off, not because they don't like the look of their husbands, but they don't like the look of themselves. And so can you say something about what it is to have gone through cancer and to have your breasts? I don't know. I was trying to find a nice way to say it, but to have your breasts
excavated.
Yeah.
That's how I call it. Excavated. Like a pumpkin, digging them out.
Oh my goodness. I feel horrible saying such a thing, but yes.
No, I said it.
Is it, what would you say about that for women? And then on top of that, having to go through that and what that was like, and what can you speak into on this topic?
Well, I mean, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was 41 years old, and I had been modeling for 30 years. So my whole value was on my external beauty. That's it.
Yeah.
And so when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which was not a genetic issue for me, it came out of nowhere, and it really sideswiped me. And I had lost really my self-esteem at that point, because I thought, well, if you take my beauty away, I have no value in this world. Like, who am I, right? I'm the guest model, but not anymore. And that was a terrible place to be in, because when we have a lack of self-esteem and we don't feel good about ourselves, we make terrible decisions. Decision making is based on our self-esteem. So when I started out my cancer journey and felt less than, because my body was about to be dissected and my hair was lost and my beauty was going to be gone, and I felt this loss of self, I had to figure out who I was without the hair and without the breasts. And that was the same person, but in a different way, in a different image. And so what I found out was that all those times where I needed to use materialism as a crutch, right, to get through the day, because if I just get this bag, I'll feel better about myself, or I just get this modeling job, I'll feel secure about myself, and maybe my husband will love me, or maybe my friends will love me, and this kind of transactional relational world. And when all of that went away, I had to figure out, like, where was my self-esteem coming from? And it certainly couldn't be coming from beauty. It couldn't be coming from materialism. And so I had to figure it out. And I figured out that my value had nothing to do with my external value. My value was who I thought I was inside. And it was my job not society's job. It was my job to nurture my self-esteem. And when I wasn't nurturing my self-esteem, or when I was surrounding myself with mean girls or women that were tearing my self-esteem apart, that was my responsibility. And so when you get rid of all of that noise and you start talking to yourself differently and starting to see yourself differently from a different perspective and a different focus, then you can build your self-esteem. So for me, when I looked at myself in the mirror without a chest and without hair, I saw the inner beauty because I was working from the inside out. I no longer depended on the next modeling job. I no longer depended on whether I had the new Prada bag. All of that left me because some doctor said to me, this is your chance of survival. Well, when somebody says that to you, all the external stuff, it doesn't matter anymore. Because at the end of the day, what do we have? We have love. We have a commitment to serving. We have a commitment to a life well led. Well, what's a life well led? To me, that's serving other people, not being served. So my focus completely shifted when I was lost, when I completely lost my beauty. And that's how I got through it. And that's how I continue to get through it. I have a great story. I'll try to make it short.
Okay.
And I ultimately went back into the dating world because my husband and I got a divorce. And so I went back into the dating world without a chest. And that's some courage. I will tell you that takes a lot of courage.
So your husband left you after the...
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
All right.
That's happened actually surprisingly more than you think, which is that's a whole nother trauma that you go through. Yeah. And so when I was going back into the dating world, at this point I had started modeling again. And the reason I went back into modeling after breast cancer was not because I wanted to be a model again. It was because I wanted to show women that your beauty cannot be rinsed off. My beauty was not dissected when my breasts were taken off. And so if I could show that in New York Fashion Week or Miami Swim Week or working with, clients like Victoria's Secret as a breastless model, then I could show women that courage is from within. And self-esteem is something that you need to work on. And so one day I just started dating and there was this one guy that wanted to meet me. And I said, do you know anything about me? And he said, no. And I wasn't asking him that like, oh, look at me. I'm, I've been successful in my life. I wanted to know if he knew that I didn't have a chest. That's what I was looking for. And he said, no, I've never Googled you. And I said, well, maybe.
You never Googled you. All right. Got it. It's got more than one meaning, but all right. Yep.
Right. Well, and I typically that would be fair. Right. But for me, I have, an issue with obviously my chest. And so I texted him an article that was coming out about me, or it had just come out about me about modeling in Miami Swim Week. And he texted me the next day and he said, I think what you're doing for the world is incredible, but I think your chest is disgusting. And I was like,
tell me how you really think. What you really think. That's great. All right.
I was like,
I actually appreciate the honesty, and at least that's something to deal with.
Well, first of all, we never went on a date, right? Now, the same week, the exact same week that happened, Victoria's Secret.
Human beings can really say some interesting things.
Well, you know what? In hindsight, it was great that he showed his true colors.
Yeah.
But literally 2 days later, Victoria's Secret hired me as a breastless model. So now I got one of my biggest modeling jobs ever. And this guy told me my chest was disgusting. So I put on my social media, I said, okay, now these are two stories that happened to me this week. Which one would you focus on? I was actually asking my followers, and people will comment. And I said, no, that you guys are wrong. I wasn't focusing on the great job that I got or the fact that this guy was a total dirtbag. I was focusing on my measure, which is my faith. And you got to get rid of the highlights. You got to get rid of the lows, and you can stay a stable life if you have sure footing. And for me, my measure is my faith. But if my measure was, oh, what's the next big job? Or, oh my gosh, this jerk said something not nice to me, so that none of those things will destroy or elevate my self-esteem. I'm just going to stay stable. And so that's kind of what I've learned throughout my life is if your measure is what society will do for you, you're always going to be slaughtered with your self-esteem. If your measure is your greatest success, that can be taken away so easily. It's got to be love and self-worth and self-care and caring for each other and serving each other. All the rest is just noise.
Yes. Man, guys, if you don't know, now you know. Christine Handy, and she's, as we mentioned right off the start, she is an author, and she has uh, the name of your book,
It's called Walk Beside Me.
Walk
Yeah. It's
Beside Me. That's right.
yeah.
And now you actually use a uh, the character in the book is
Willow.
you don't. That's
Yeah.
right. Is
It's a
use a different
fictional
name.
yeah,
That's
it's
right.
fiction. Right.
It's a fictional depiction,
Right.
and that's interesting. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later. But
Yeah.
guys, if you want to get some insight, she shares her story in there in a different way, and so I think that especially if you are a cancer survivor, if you're someone that's you want to hear a little bit more, go check that out, or perhaps look her up on her website. You can find out where she's speaking, where she's modeling.
Yeah.
Go Google her. And you know, okay. So
It's a
yeah,
lot to digest.
yes, it is a lot to digest, and I'm just taking that in because there are a number of different aspects there. What do you take in from this guy saying this? You've got the modeling, the new modeling gig, and just recently I was speaking at a real estate conference, and it was I was really I don't even I was like just sitting with the fact that after all these years, I used to get people used to make fun of my name when I was a kid. They didn't know how to
Mm.
say D'Souza. The moment
Yep.
they saw an apostrophe in the name, they just didn't know what to do back in those days. And so they'd say all sorts of funny things. And I would even apologize. I would apologize for my own name,
Right.
and ashamed, all these kinds of things. But I'm speaking at this conference in front of thousands of people, and I was sharing, about some characteristics that you need to have, but integrity, honesty, these kind of things. And then later on, I was asked a question about my success, and I got to speak into the fact that, well, none of those things matter without my relationship with God. That's where, right? That's where
Exactly.
that comes from.
Exactly.
And I and so having thousands of people there listening to me didn't really do anything for me.
No.
Didn't change me anyway, right? The next day I was still in the hotel room in my underwear, cleaning up, getting ready to check out, right? Like none of those
Yes.
people are there. And I know that people have this idea of what that fame, fortune, all that stuff must look like. But at the end of the day, you're still by yourself. You're
Exactly.
still separate from them, and so that relationship, as you're talking about, the relationship with God is such a piece that can really be difficult to convey.
Yes.
And the question I sort of want to ask off of that is, you said a lot, but I know that there is a much harder walk
Oh yeah.
in behind it to
Yeah.
be able to, like you talked about, how you view yourself, loving yourself. These are almost like self-care. These are almost
Right.
like buzzwords nowadays. And I don't
True.
know that anyone even really, most people, I don't think they know what that even looks like to try to love that person when you look in the mirror. Can you what are
Well,
your
that's
thoughts
true.
on that? Can you describe what that looked like in behind the
Well,
scenes? Because
yes.
you know,
Yeah, for one thing is funny, faith will look funny to most people until it starts to rain. Ask Noah. That's
mm, yes, yes, because then everybody wants to get on board.
okay, sorry, that was an aside. But
Yeah.
no, I was chiseled away. I was so focused on being a socialite. I was so focused. I mean, and these are not flattering characteristics of me. I was so focused on being, the eye candy, and so focused on, looking messy without looking messy when I walked out my front door. That kind of look like, oh, she
Yes.
looks like she just got
Yes.
out of bed, but she's gorgeous. And oh my God, she's
Yes.
beautiful. That kind of
Yes.
idea. That was me. That was the
Yes.
life I lived.
Oh,
But you know what?
I've heard there's a whole series of apparently on Instagram that women like to take these pictures of, oh, I just woke up. I just woke up pictures that they took an hour to get ready to make the picture of just getting out of
Exactly.
bed. Yeah.
I mean, that's
Got
how
it.
I lived for 30 years. And it was so unsustaining.
Yeah.
And it was like quicksand.
Sounds
When
tiring.
it was exhausting, but it's quicksand, because when your idols and your strongholds are things that can be stripped away, well, guess what? When they're stripped away, what do you have?
Right.
Like, I felt empty. I felt like I was going to kill myself. If cancer wasn't going to take me, I was going to take me, because I didn't know who I was. For 40 years, I tried to pretend I was somebody different. That's a long time to pretend. And then when all of those things that are your strongholds get ripped away, you're like, oh my God, what do I have left?
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, I had women in my life that stood in the space until I could come out of that victimhood and be a vine. They became my vine. They became my courage until I could get my courage back. So I was literally borrowing their courage. I was like, I don't know how to get through the day. And they're like, just take one step in front of the other. And I literally had to do that for months. I went through 15 months of chemotherapy. I sat in that chemo chair for 28 times. 28 times. If you have never been to chemotherapy with somebody, you don't know what that means. Yeah. I could just sit here for 5 minutes and digest the fact that I sat in that chemo chair and got with a port and got plugged into that medicine 28 times. That's trauma. Yeah. But when you're sitting in that chair, you can either be a victim or you can be a vine. And that's a choice, and that's a focus. And so what I ended up doing was I was trying to help other people that were next to me or beside me or in front of me or behind me. I was trying to help them, because by helping others, we also help ourselves. But also by helping others, we nurture our self-esteem. So slowly I was building back my life, but it wasn't based on anything external. It wasn't based on anything that anybody could ever take away from me. So if my beauty came back or my hair came back, or if I went back to modeling, that was great. I was going to use it to serve other people, but I wasn't going to use that to serve my life. And there's a difference.
Isn't it interesting that your pain created your purpose?
Absolutely. We all have a choice. We all have a choice.
Yes. Well, oftentimes people will say, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know, they're searching for motivation. They're searching for all of these things. And I don't really even believe in motivation anymore. By and large, I really look at it as, what's your commitment? What's your commitment in this world? What's your commitment to your family? What's your commitments to yourself? And you will have all the motivation you ever need. And, as I'm hearing you share about recognizing who you could be for the world, who you could be for women, I can really hear the power that it generated inside. And when you talk about that work that you had to do, you were borrowing off of the people around you.
Yes.
Now, I find that a lot of people are terrible at just accepting acknowledgement, like just acknowledging themselves for who they are, for what they've done. And oftentimes they've got to make it into this ego thing. This is what most of us live in, right?
Yeah,
it's all about that. Hey, look, I've done this. I'm a swimsuit model. I'm all of these things. I'm not a swimsuit model, guys, by the way. But I'm sure I look pretty good in Speedos. But anyways, that's debatable. Okay, so we take pride in these things and we build up around that.
Doing.
So when you actually, in all of this stuff, or what we have, right? You described that already.
Yes.
And so when it comes to actually acknowledging who we are, I just find that people are completely disassociated from who they actually are. They can't just, hey, you did amazing, and just say, thank you. Yeah, I think I did a great job. Thank you for that, and be able to move on. It really creates something else. Either they need to tear it down for all those people that hear those voices, and you're like, oh,
Not
you tear
worthy.
yourself down, or the
Yeah.
other one being you take it and you're like, oh, look at
Too
how
elevated.
amazing I am, right? You elevate yourself based on somebody's compliment, somebody's validation of you. Can
Oh
you say
yeah.
something about that?
Of course.
Right?
I'd love to talk about this because
Okay.
there's a couple of things going on. One is pride, right? We are taught in this world that we should not be boisterous, right? It's not boisterous to say, this is what I'm trying to do for the world. That's not boisterous. That's using your voice. But the pride comes in, like, for instance, a lot of cancer patients have a hard time accepting help because we're taught that we're supposed to be tough and independent and courageous, and we don't need, other people's help. That's just not true. When
Who
you
tells
get,
you that?
I mean, I
Who
think
tells
women
you
are taught that all the
that?
time. I think
Okay.
women, I mean, I would ask your wife about that, but I bet she's heard that a lot. And yeah, make a note of that. And hopefully, if you have daughters, tell them that's not true. You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to be courageous all the time. You can ask for help. That actually takes courage to ask for help. And so when people are self-deprecating, it's because they have this, well, not everybody, I can't speak for everybody, but it's this mentality of, I care what other people think. I need to care what other people think. But again, going back to a doctor saying to me, this is your percentile chance of survival, you really don't care what other people think anymore. And that's freedom. You lose the pride, you lose the ego. And if somebody compliments me, say, you know what, you're doing a lot of really good things in the world, I'm like, thank you. Thank you. And that's because I don't care what people think of me. And I'm honest about, that's a compliment. I'm going to accept it. And I have no pride in this. And I appreciate that. But so many people get caught up in this. No, I got to be tough and strong and I can't take any help. And that actually hurt me in the beginning of my chemo because I thought that I was supposed to be this strong, independent woman. And when people kept showing up for me, I would say, no, I can do this. I can do that. But the truth is I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
Oh my goodness, there's something in there that I think when people are trying to be strong and independent, women especially, guys do the exact same thing. When they're trying to say this, no, I don't need help, or I'm good, you're literally pushing away the people that are trying to love you, that are trying to connect with you, that are trying to be there for you. And when we build a pattern of doing that, you literally push, and then they turn around and go, I'm really lonely. Yeah, because you've pushed away everyone that was trying to come alongside you.
Well, that's not good self-care, right? If you have good self-care, you have a good self-esteem. Yeah. And you have to do those types of exercises every day to work on your self-esteem. You have to say nice things about yourself. So it first starts in your head. If you're telling yourself, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not pretty anymore, I'm old, ageism, I've lost my chest, who will want me? Like that can be a narrative for me, but it's not a narrative for me because I look in the mirror and I say, I am lovable, I am worthy, I am strong, I am dependent, and I am independent. And I'm courageous, even though there's some days I wake up and I have no courage. Yeah. But what we tell ourselves, we become. And then if you surround yourself with people that are tearing you down, a lot of times that happens with women, then your self-esteem is going to be negated even more. So we have to protect ourselves. Like it says in the Bible, it says, take every thought captive. We have to protect those voices by our own voices that are saying unhealthy things to ourselves, and also the voices around us. And if we take those thoughts captive and we get rid of them and only ingest the positivity, only ingest the things that will nurture our lives and push us forward into the life that we can have and want, and not take us back to the place that we were that was unhealthy, then that's taking thoughts captive. And it goes back to the faith.
Is this is this too intimate a question? When you're first with your husband and his hands go somewhere that, you know, breasts are not, does your mind go off to a bunch of different places? What's he thinking? You know, any of this kind of stuff?
That never happened with my husband, because
Hey.
but when I lost my chest, I had implants originally.
Yeah.
And
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and then then I got implant illness, like I needed any more trauma. And then I had
Oh my goodness.
then they excavated my breasts after that. So technically I've had 4 mastectomies. And by the time that happened, I was divorced. Or going through divorce. Actually, during that, I was going through divorce. So, but I mean, I have a boyfriend, and it's not easy. It's just not easy, because
Yeah.
you just don't know what people, I didn't feel bad about myself, but some people are boob guys.
Yes. Yes, I do know that.
Exactly. So I can't do anything about that.
Yes. Yes. Well, you know, the reality is that even as a man, sometimes you find yourself thinking things when you do certain stuff, right? I touch my wife's breasts and I'm like, oh, did I squeeze too hard or whatever it is, right? So
Right.
now I've been married for more than 2 decades, so there is something there for me where in intimacy I'm like, oh, hang on, she's thinking this, she's probably thinking this, because we've been together for so long. And it's not an insecurity, but
Right.
I can only imagine what that must be like. Until I was married, I got to be honest, I didn't really grasp what that was like for women, the number of things that they go through or that they're thinking about. You know, by and large, for a guy, when we're talking about sex, he's ready to go. And he's not thinking about the size of his belly, the hair on the back of his, on his back. He's not thinking about any of those things. It is like heroin running through your body and through your brain. Your brain is just vibrating, and that's it. And meanwhile, after being married, you come to think your wife's thinking, okay, I had done this, are my legs shaved?
Right.
And will this be okay? And, oh, is it that time of month or what, and the kids and the plumber and the bill. And as a guy, testosterone running through you wipes away all of those things so that you can see nothing other than the woman in front of you. But she's coming in with a whole world of stuff.
Baggage.
What's he, what's he going to think? Should I turn the lights off? Should I,
Right. And then on top of that, no chest. Yeah. Exactly.
And now on top of that, because one of the things that in my own situation with my wife was that going through a hysterectomy, there is something very intimate there for her about, as a woman.
Yes.
Now we already had our kids, but there was something very intimate there about not being able to ever have kids again.
Sure.
And
it's a closed
what would that
door.
be like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I didn't have a hysterectomy, but somebody messaged me on Instagram yesterday and they said, I haven't been in your situation, but you give me courage because I had a hysterectomy and it feels really scary for me. So I don't know how to speak to that, but I can just tell you that when you wake up,
breasts are part of,
of course, the female
for women,
anatomy.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big part of it. And, I don't even know. I don't know how to explain the feeling of what that loss is like. It's a great loss. And another really short story is when I first lost my chest to the breast implants, because I never woke up from breast cancer and had nothing on my chest. I had mastectomies, but I had implants right away. Yeah. So I always looked like I, had felt. And so when I first lost my chest in 2020 to breast implant illness, I put a picture out there, and I always wear really tight stuff because I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm not trying to be somebody different. I am who I am. God made me who I am. And if this is where I'm supposed to be, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so I wear really tight things, and because it's comfortable, whatever. And so I put a picture out there, and a guy messaged me, and or not messaged me, it was right on my social. He said, "Were you born a man or a woman?" And I was like, well, we're going through this whole craziness in our culture about, people taking whatever. I don't even want to speak to it,
Yep.
but, and so I was like, well, why would you even think that? And he said, oh, never mind. It's not important. But it struck me. I had to call my mother and go, Mom, do I look like a man? But there was that first inkling to me of, I need to work on my self-esteem, because if some random person can put some rude comment on my Instagram and I get affected by that, that's my self-esteem issue.
Yeah.
And so I said, forget it. I don't care about what he said. And I'm going to go back to being me, and I'm going to work on my self-esteem and not think twice about it. But what makes a great story for interviews, right?
Yeah. But
Because
that's really
some men.
it's interesting because it comes from a totally different direction. You've never really considered that line of thought, so I can only imagine.
No, it never occurred to me
What?
that I wanted to remove them. I never wanted to remove my chest.
Right.
In fact, when I was modeling, when I was in my younger teens, well, not younger teens, like 17, 18, I went to work one day on a modeling shoot, and one of my friends who had been modeling with for years, she looked much different. And I said to her, I haven't seen you a couple months. And she said, I had some ribs removed, because women have ribs removed to model. And I looked at her body, and I touched her tiny waist, and it was really so petite and pretty. And I looked at my own body. I'll never forget. I was like 18 years old. I looked at my own body, and I said, what would I want to get rid of? My chest was never part of that. I never, ever thought I want to get rid of my chest. And then ultimately that's what happened. And I'm like, I would have given a rib. I didn't want to give my chest.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
That is very interesting, because you were talking about the things that you put in importance on.
Yeah.
Were some of the things in your journey that were taken away from you that actually allowed you to grow in your confidence in yourself, right? Like that's really interesting. There's actually there's a woman online. I remember seeing her on TikTok, and she had her breasts removed, and so she I think she had done a video or something with no shirt on, and it was it violated a whole bunch of guidelines, and but it was really interesting, because then she did it again. This time she put tape over the nipple area, and she was able to sort of address, hey, I look like a guy now. Like I'm not here to try to show you guys a porn video or something. I'm here to share about this journey.
This exists.
And I thought that was amazing. And it just challenges so many different views and thoughts that we have around this, right? Women with breasts, and oh my goodness, even how, as a man, how much stock you put into the visual of it, I can't even explain. I can't even explain that. I don't even know where I'm going with that. It's just something that's there, and you're like, oh yeah, you see them, you recognize them. Oh, she doesn't have them. And then your brain sort of says something's missing, something wrong, right?
Well, I try to hug my friends, and I'm like, get in a little closer, because I miss that. Like, I miss that. I mean, I love when their breasts are like pushing on my chest. Like, I miss that. It's kind of like it's like a motherly thing, right? We have milk that comes out of our breasts. It's not a natural. And so my friends, I'm just like, hug me a little tighter.
Yes.
Feels
good.
Oh
my goodness. Yes. Actually, totally side note.
Yes.
I remember, culturally, we always hug and kiss. Then I went through a stage where I had lots of Caucasian friends that didn't do that kind of intimacy, and so they actually were like, hey, keep a little bit of space. And it was funny because years later I would be like, I took that on like, oh, I'm creating some sort of issue for them. And so like you, I got to a point where I was like, you know what? If someone doesn't like being hugged, you're gonna have to find another friend because
It's
that's
not your problem.
right.
It's not your
That's a you
problem.
problem, not a
That's a
me
you problem.
problem.
That's exactly right.
um,
Yes.
but okay, I've got to ask this question. I don't want to get away from this. I don't know if you want to talk about it. Husband, you're going through this. The husband leaves. Um, and I'm sure that that is, for most wives, that's got to be something like a nightmare that they can only imagine. The moment you hear, you add in all of these things of, if I don't have my breast, will he leave me? And I don't know if that's the reason that he left.
That's a good question. I
You
don't
know,
either, but I will say that I think a lot of people who go through cancer don't know how to handle it. And I think fear translates into anger. And for instance, my children, when I was going through breast cancer, were wanted to keep me at a distance. They weren't girls, they were boys, right? Boys are less emotional and are less emoting of how they feel. And my kids were 11 and 13, so it was really difficult for them to share how they felt. So instead, they kind of pushed me away. And that's kind of a normal reaction because when they're afraid that they're going to lose their mother, right? I was 90 pounds wet with no hair and no eyelashes, and oftentimes secluded in my room because I couldn't be around other people because of germs. And I actually wore a mask. Like I knew the mask thing well before COVID. And I started to understand that fear translates into anger with that type of situation. My kids weren't alienate me because they understood it. They were alienating me because they were afraid. They were afraid they're going to lose their mother. And I think sometimes with caregivers that happens as well. Not all, but a lot of times people are so afraid they don't know how to care or love their spouse. And I'm not saying that that's what happened in my marriage. I don't really understand it completely myself. But in my mind, disease is something you cannot control, right? You can't help if you get breast cancer. Marriage and divorce, you can control, right? Those are choices. And so that was always a bit confusing to me. Well, I mean, I don't think you should forsake people, especially in times of trouble. But a lot of times when people go through trouble, that's when people forsake them. And so it was unfortunate and maybe more for my kids than anybody, which is hard. But I can't judge,
mm,
my ex-husband because I don't know what was going through his head and I can't speak on that. I can only speak on being the patient. Like you can speak
mhm.
on being the caregiver, right?
Yeah,
Those are
yeah,
totally different. It's a
yeah. Oh,
different type of duress.
I can completely judge him because I know that side of it. And what I would say to that is that, because
Can
there was a
completely
time
judge
when
him.
my yeah, there was a time when with my wife and I, we were really close to getting a divorce, and that was
Yeah.
before any of this. And one of the things I realized is that, um, for as a guy, as a man, it was more about questioning me than it was about questioning my wife. It's more about questioning who I am. And even though we might blame the other person, it's because I didn't know how to identify, right? We're not great with the whole emotion piece and the,
Exactly.
what self-esteem piece, what I'm
Yeah.
supposed, that's all, you, as
Self-care.
a guy, you're just supposed to do this, be here, show up, but when you're questioning yourself,
Yes.
what who are you supposed to talk to? What are you supposed to what does that expression look like? We Many
We don't
times
know.
we don't have the tools for that. And the only way to, because we're trying to find a reason, we're trying to make sense of it. By and large, guys are trying to find the solution, and then we turn around and say, "Oh,
It's
must be
your
your
fault.
fault," right?
Right.
And in with hindsight, I've been able to look back at that and go, okay, I can see that that was about my own self-esteem.
Right.
I didn't have the strength. I didn't trust myself. I didn't have my own security. And
Mm.
at the end of the day, without that, having gone through that, I don't know if I would have been able to be the
Yes.
support, for my wife as she went through this. Because one of the things, and I want to share this with you guys, if you're listening, is that when going through that as the support, I was falling apart, and so I could share certain things with my wife in
Yeah.
that time, but there were places that I just didn't know how to express. And so I chose not to express it there. I called other friends and said, "Hey, I just need to say this. I don't know what any of this means or anything." And I was lucky to have friends that said, "Okay, yeah, thanks." And they didn't try to solve anything for me. They didn't try to tell me the reasoning for all of it. They just let me spit it out and then go on, because quite frankly, 5 minutes later I'd go through it all again, and 5 minutes later I'd go through it all again, and so the next day you'd go through it all, and that's just part of the blur of
Yes.
going through cancer,
Yes.
because there are no easy answers. We would love the simple fix, and there is no simple fix to it. And so,
Yeah.
anyways, that's what I would share. And if your ex is listening, I just encourage them, just take a look at that. There's nothing wrong. Actually, that's the other part. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a natural reaction. If
Right.
you don't know how to deal with it, if you don't know how to look in, right? I think most
Get
people
help.
don't understand this piece. Like, you're sharing all of this stuff, and people think, well, why can't I be like her?
Yes. Well, it
Well,
takes a lot of introspection, a
yeah,
lot of introspection, a lot of work.
yeah,
Yeah. You got
yeah.
to do the inner
What was
work.
that like? What was that like, having to
Well,
do that inner work? Come
well,
on,
it's
because
not
that's a transferable skill. That's something
absolutely.
you can take into any
Absolutely.
area.
It's really hard and it takes a lot of dedication, but it has to become your focus. So if you really want to change your trajectory of your life because you feel insecure, or you have a lack of self-esteem, you can do that. But it's day after day after day work. And so when I was going through chemotherapy, although I had a huge community of people that helped me, I honestly don't know how I wouldn't be here without that huge community of people. But even though there was a good support system, there's still a lot of time when you're alone, especially alone with your thoughts, which can be really toxic.
Yes.
And so when I was alone with those thoughts, or in the bathroom throwing up on my bathroom floor, right? I was doing the introspection work then. I was saying to myself, okay, you cannot continue to live this life of feeling less than. There's got to be a better way. And I would question myself, like, where did these false idols come from? How did this happen? Like, how did we get here? And once I figured out, like, okay, well, starting modeling at 11, it became very transactional. My modeling agency would say, okay, if you do this booking for me, I'll get you this photographer. And so I started to really learn that the world was transactional. Well, when you're going through breast cancer and you're going through illness, you realize the world doesn't have to be transactional. And so I started to change this mindset that I had that wasn't working for me. And I decided, okay, well, I made a list of the things that I wanted to accomplish in my life. And instead of being fearful of, okay, well, I may not make it to the next day, I started to keep that list and I started to add on to the list. And that became hope for me. And so if I'm adding things to my list, like I want to write a book, I'm not going to die tomorrow, right? I've got
Yeah.
hope in my heart, and hope is eternal.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking to myself, I may die tomorrow, I'm not going to make a list of things that I want to do. That's not hope. And that's slaughtering your self-esteem. And so the more hopeful I became, the more of a light I became to myself, first and foremost, and to my community. And so once I was done with chemotherapy, I was strong. I had a lot of courage because I had a list of things I wanted to do. And I knew at that point that the outcome didn't matter. And so if I wrote a book and it wasn't successful, it was okay. But just the fact that I was on this planet and had the ability to write the book,
Yes.
that was all that mattered.
Yes.
So it was, again, and it's a lot. People look at me and they go, well, you're so strong and you're so courageous and you have this high self-esteem. I had zero self-esteem when I went into breast cancer. You have to do the work.
Yes. For those of you guys that are listening and not watching, I'm sort of giggling to myself over here with excitement. I'm just giddy because for anyone that's gone through anything, you get excited for the struggle that someone goes through because you know what that develops. You know the perseverance that someone has to build to get through
Yes.
that, and the heights of the mountains. When you reach the top, you reach some sort of success. Those are actually never nearly as exciting as
The fight.
how you get to know yourself through the challenges,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that you said?
The fight, like the
The
fight, the
fight, yes,
battles. Yeah, the
yes,
fight. That
yes,
kind of, yeah, I got to do this. I'm going to get through this. And then when you're there, you're like, okay,
yeah,
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 okay.
yeah. That's right. Hey, I've been through this. These things are nothing for me right now. This is I can go
Yeah.
through this part, and it's almost like a race. Like if you were running a race, you do all your prep, and then you get into the race, and for Olympic racers, it's less than 10 seconds, but that 10 seconds is like an eternity because you're pushing yourself through that, and staying focused, all the stuff afterwards is okay,
Yeah.
that's nice, right? But it's what most people will cherish the most is
Yes.
those. If you can, guys, if you can take a moment to look at your struggles, to look at the challenges, those are the things that have built you up, and don't be ashamed of them, because those
Yes.
are the things that are most inspiring to other people. And I know for a fact that you would agree with that, Christine.
Oh yeah, those are the things that refine us. But
Yeah.
those are but it's interesting because 80% of people quit in the middle.
Mm.
It's because they
Yeah.
don't want to continue the fight. It's the people
Yeah.
like us that keep going and going and
Yeah.
going, and we're the ones that are teaching other people you can't quit in
Yeah.
the middle. You got to
Yeah.
keep going. And it
Yeah.
really is it will refine you. And
Yeah.
it's you have to turn your messes into a message because
Yeah.
it's hard.
Well, I mean, the podcast, Leadership to Wealth.
Yes.
Leadership is first, and oftentimes I was actually just talking to a couple of students yesterday and today about most people will never give themselves enough runway to be successful. They'll never give themselves enough runway to actually become good at something so that they can become experts in an area.
That's
And
because they quit in the middle.
that's right.
It's the
That's
same
right.
thing. It's the same
Yeah,
concept. It's exactly
exactly.
true.
Yeah,
80% of people quit in the middle. They don't give
yeah,
themselves a long enough runway. It's a
yeah.
lot of people.
It is. It is a lot of people. That was one of the difficult things about speaking to thousands of people. Is in the back of your mind, you're thinking, what can I say that will resonate with that person over there, that they
Yeah.
will give themselves just a little bit more and keep going just a little bit further, um, because what happens, and I'm sure that you have this happen to you in your arena, is
Yes.
that some people look at you and think, oh well, yeah, obviously she can do it. She was a model. She was this. She's
Right.
got kids. She's
Right.
all of
Yeah.
this stuff, and that makes sense that she can do it. But I couldn't do that. Do you run
Well,
into that stuff?
oh my gosh, I actually got hired where I became a speaker in 2018 after my book was published. And I started speaking in women's groups. I got hired by big corporations to speak. I've been hired to speak in hospitals. And one time, well, not one time, multiple times, I was hired by the prison system to speak in male prisons.
Really?
Well, yeah, and I originally I thought it was to speak in women's prisons, but it was just to speak in male prisons. And I thought to myself, what am I going to say? So when I got to the prison first time, there was 500 inmates, and they're all men. And one of them raised their hand. I introduced myself, and he raised his hand right away, and he said, "What can a middle-aged white woman teach us about anything?" And you know what I
Ooh.
said? I said hope. I said hope. And that was it. I went on and on and on, talked about hope. And I basically said, you can be in these walls or you can be out in the world in the same exact prison, because people take themselves prison
Yes.
to fear and to hatred and to judgment, like they were judging me. And to, okay, why can't you serve in a prison? You can. I mean, I convicted that guy. He came over and gave me a hug. He was like, oh man. He was like, you
Did he
proved me
come in
wrong.
close?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, but he didn't have the chest. So
Okay.
but no, I mean, you can have I have different platforms I speak to all the time, but the story is universal. It's hope, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Heavy
So
stuff.
it is, man. Well, it's heavy, but it's also inspiring. I'm like,
Thank you.
I don't
Are you
know
sweating?
what,
Are
I
you
am
sweating?
sweating. I am absolutely sweating, but I'm also, for anyone that's ever watched, The Incredible Hulk or something like that. Yeah. I'm tightening my back and my brain is thinking about ripping, the back of my jacket out and turning into the Hulk right now, because it's just kind of giving me energy
Firing
and
you up.
excitement, firing me. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
come on, how can you not want to go take on life? When you hear how inspiring it is to hear other people taking on life,
Sure.
right?
And doing great things. I'm not talking about me. There's people do great things.
Yeah. Well, to me, that speaking in a men's prison, having worked in a men's prison before, there are a lot of animals in there.
Yes.
And they've put themselves in that prison of being an animal, right? And so there is, it would be challenging to speak in there, and to be able to go in there and drop the mic like that. I'm inspired because I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what it would have been like for some of those guys to go back to their cells, to just have that playing in the back of their mind. And for you guys that are listening, I think there's something to realize that you have a voice. And I know you, Christine, talk about that, about your own voice and trying to help people to find their voice. Each of us has a voice. And if you're listening, you have a voice. There are people that are watching and listening to you, and they're looking for inspiration. And you don't have time to waste time tearing yourself down, because there are people that are looking for you to move forward.
Well said.
Whew. That's what you just got out of me.
Yeah.
That's what you just got out of me.
Mic drop. Mic drop. That was great.
Okay, so Christine, come on, tell me what's going on. What do you got lined up for the rest of the year? We've talked a lot about the past, and I know we didn't even scratch the surface, but
probably
what exciting things do you have looking forward?
Oh, I live a very sedentary life.
Yeah, it sounds that way.
I'm joking. No, I got into this program at Harvard for the month of July. It's a on-campus intense internship residency in creative writing and literature. So I'm doing that in July. And my book was bought to be a film in 2018, and it actually is starting to film in September. So between being a social media influencer and a model, I'm modeling in Miami Swim Week in 3 weeks. I'm getting in shape. I have heels on right now to get my legs ready. So I'm modeling in Miami Swim Week. Then I'm doing this residency at Harvard, and then the movie's being filmed. So,
wow. Is there a husband who becomes an ex in the book?
In the book, at the end of the book, in the book, you're not really sure. Like it leaves you. It's like a cliffhanger.
If you need a heel for the movie, I could do that job really well. I'm good at that one. I've come to learn that one. So listen, if you're talking to them and they need someone to play a heel, just think of your boy right here on Leadership to Wealth podcast.
I'll come back after the film and we can talk about the film. I'm expecting it to win an Oscar.
Oh my goodness.
Well, think about it. If you think about all the films about illness, right? Think about Philadelphia, Steel Magnolias, like these major films. The protagonist dies. The patient dies. Yes. So this film is going to be totally different. I'm so excited to have a film about hope. She lives. It's hope. She lives. Don't you think we need that in the world?
you get so used to the to the
Yes, the
protagonist dying
narrative.
that, oh,
You do.
he
You get
actually
rid
lived.
of.
Actually, it's a good feel-good story.
It's a great
That's
feel good
great.
story, but
Yeah,
trust me when I tell you, you're gonna really watch this woman go through hell, and that's
love
the
it.
part we didn't really touch up on the podcast. When you
Yeah.
see the film, you'll see it.
Whew, love it, love it. Okay, so, man, what the world? You wrote the book. They're making a movie about it. You're gonna be in Miami Swim
Swim
Week.
week, modeling,
Uh,
Harvard.
yeah, yeah, and you're still a
Very
mother.
sedentary. Very
Yeah.
sedentary.
Wait, we didn't even mention you're still a mother. Like that. That's a full-time job, even without the other jobs.
And I
So
have a
how do you?
boyfriend, so that's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's you got another person to babysit. So, sorry, boyfriend. What's boyfriend's name?
Tom.
Tom. Sorry about that, Tom. I know you try to be more of a support, but at the end of the day, most of us really rely on our wives to actually help us process emotions because we're terrible at it. So, okay, so you've got all these things, but then you are still a mother. How do you balance that?
Well, my kids are 24 and 22, but
Okay.
I think in
Okay.
general,
So now you don't need to make them their lunches for
breakfast,
school.
right.
Yeah.
But I think in general, I'm modeling grace. I'm modeling courage. Yes, I am a model. I'm modeling courage. And everything I do in society is modeling something. And
Yes.
it's not modeling clothes to model clothes. I'm modeling courage. I'm modeling bravery. And so my children see that. I'm showing them what that looks like.
Yes. Wow. I think we just got the title for the episode. What are you modeling?
It was a
Whew.
very good idea. No, it's true. Like, we as parents, we can model a certain life, right?
Yeah.
Prior to my cancer diagnosis, I was modeling materialism.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to my children about that. I've said, I'm really sorry. I was lost. I was clinging to a stronghold that was not working. And we've worked through that because it's important to say to your kids, I did this wrong and I want to do it better. That's humility. They need to see humility. They need to see that it's okay to be a parent and be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There's no perfection in this life. And so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm doing a lot of this for my children to show them what serving looks like.
Yeah. I'll just share something that I've been doing with my family is um, I'm changing up some of the words, like wrong and right. And
Good for
this
you.
this may be interesting. What I'm sharing with them is this idea of uh, instead of I did this wrong, it didn't work. This didn't work in the way that I wanted it to, and so I'm going to do it differently. I'm changing this. I want to do this in this way, and part of the reason that I've got 4 kids, and the oldest are girls. Part of the reason that I started changing my vocabulary around these things is because right and wrong also then automatically take them to moralistic
Shame.
views, right? And
Shame.
shame.
And
And
shame.
yes. And so I was like, you can do something in a way that doesn't work, and
Right.
you didn't do anything wrong.
That's right. Good for
there's
you.
just there's just something else to change, and I, especially because I have girls first, I've had to learn the hard way that words really do matter,
Yes.
and you can really crush them, and so it's important to me to really change those words for myself, but so
Yes.
that they hear me modeling that, and it really leads into that resiliency to be able to come
Exactly.
back, to be able to take another step. Oh, it wasn't anything was wrong, it just didn't work, and
Exactly.
here's a different way to try again, right? So
Yeah.
um
Good for
okay,
you.
final words of wisdom that you would like to share as we just wrap up here.
Just one thing I like to say to myself every day is let go and let God.
Amen.
It's out of my control.
Yeah.
Let go and let God. And
Yeah.
that is freeing for me. My measure is my faith. It's not society's accolades. It's not negative. It's faith.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how to fully even explain that to people in that you in having, and I think you can understand this because I think that's how you're expressing it, is you've got that faith that literally, if that's there, then you can just go take on all those other things. And for me, it's almost like when those things come about that I'm stressing over, that I'm tearing myself down about,
Yes. Hmm.
I can look at those and go, uh, I can let go of them because I look at the and go, well, what's the reality of that
Right.
against what God thinks of me? And which do I care about more? Do I care more about how I think of myself or how God
Right.
thinks of me? And
That's
that
so
actually
true.
became a superpower because now, okay, I'm going to take God's word on what he thinks of me over even what I think of myself. So
That's
I
a
don't know if that
self-esteem nurture.
explains.
Well, and I think that we so freely give other people grace, but if we
Yes.
give ourselves grace,
Yes.
that's where it
Yes.
starts. That's
Yeah.
another thing you should teach your daughters. Give yourself the grace and mercy we so
Mm.
freely like to give others.
Yes. Wow. Ladies, ladies and gentlemen, Christine, rock star, swimsuit model, survivor handy in the house. Christine, thank you so
Thank you.
much for coming on and sharing and your life, your struggles, your
Thank you.
spirituality. I really appreciate that.
Thank
And
you.
how long before do you
The
think
film?
before the movie? Yeah.
I think it'll start filming in September and it will be out. We're hoping to have it out for Cannes Film Festival in May. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay, Wyatt, you got to put a note there. Shout
Yeah, I'll
out to
come back
Wyatt, my
on.
producer, and find out what that whole thing was
Yeah.
like and what it's like to see something
Oh
that
yeah.
you wrote down as a hope to write a
Yeah.
book, and how that occurs for you after now seeing it come to fruition in a movie.
It's going to be
Woo!
exciting. Yeah.
Woo.
Again, it's not self-serving. It's not about me. It's about giving people hope.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. But
Yeah.
it'll definitely be fun to
It'll be fun. It'll be fun.
That's awesome. I mean,
It's
that you
so
got
it's
one
fun.
life, you know,
Got one
uh,
life.
do it and put it out there. And if you fail at it,
Who cares?
okay, you
Right.
tried, right? So,
That's the other
uh,
thing. Like we're showing thriving. We are
yes,
showing it's not about showing survival, it's about showing thriving.
yeah,
Tomorrow is promised to nobody.
yeah,
We have today. Live it.
yes, yes, yes. A good friend of mine said to me, um, you want to create your life so that in everything there can be fun, play, and ease.
I love
And
that.
I took that on, and I really tried to take that on through my wife's
Mm.
journey,
Yes.
and I quite frankly failed at it most of the time. But
You
I've got to,
try. You
I
try.
tried, and I've got to say, if not for taking that on, I can't imagine what that would have been like. But
Right.
just trying to be in there, so simple things like even saying to talking to my wife and saying, "Hon, I am gonna get married again after you go, just so you know." So, um, and which of course led into a deeper conversation and crying and all that kind of stuff. But
I'm sure.
whoo, Christine, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
I appreciate so much that who you are, what you've shared with us, but who you are more importantly for the world. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Encouragement helps me too. Thank you.
Come on. Well, I'm gonna encourage you to go kill that movie, go blow it out, go hit those runways,
Thank
in
you.
the tight outfits to show people how. Actually, forget about show people, but so that you can get those close hugs. More
Yeah.
importantly,
Well, no, to show
yeah,
beauty is an inside job. Inside
yeah,
job.
inside out. You got it.
Mhm.
All right, guys, this is another episode of the Leadership to Wealth podcast. Make sure you go to the show notes, go check out Christine's YouTube page, subscribe. More importantly, go get that book, especially if you are if you're in that world of cancer at all or survivor, and help support her as she continues to be this for the world, and to be there for women, and to be there for guys too, and for families as well. So go check that out, guys. That'll be in the show notes. So, but for another episode, I'm your host, Neil D'Souza.